And in this series of episodes, we're continuing our examination of Polish-German relations throughout history.
Despite there having been some difficult moments in Polish-German relations even before, there was probably never a bigger trial for Polish-German relations than the Second World War and the immediate aftermath after the war. It was naturally probably the bloodiest, maybe apart from the Soviet German fighting on the Eastern Front, which also claimed the lives of many, many million people. But if we limit ourselves to just German-Polish relations during the Second World War, we could summarize it by Germany killing around 5 million Polish citizens, of which 3 million were Polish Jews, but also around 2 million other Poles were killed by the Germans during the war. So it was a complete massacre and something that left lasting repercussions on Polish-German relations, which even until this day is very important. Of course, there has been some form of reconciliation, but the Poles, they might have forgiven, maybe not all of them, but they certainly haven't forgot. So it is something that still is in the back of everyone's heads whenever there is some kind of Polish-German political or cultural event.
And it's still happening. I mean, we look at, for example, the controversy of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline.
Absolutely.
This is Russia and Germany bypassing the rest of this part of
it. Re-evokes old memories, and I can't count the number of headlines in Polish magazines talking about Molotov-Ribbentrop 2, for example. So it certainly is something that is with us to this day. And if we look at the way that the conflict took place, how it really was shaped from the start, it wasn't that it got worse over time during the Second World War. It started with massacres straight from the get-go with the German invasion in 1939. Of course, there was for a while this attempt by the Germans to clear the Wehrmacht of atrocities and saying that, oh, this was all Waffen-SS, the Gestapo, and the camps. But it's not true. The German army was heavily involved in committing massacres, both at Polish POWs, but also a lot of civilian massacres taking place.
And I think that is the striking feature of the Second World War in this part of the world. And I've mentioned it before. But Timothy Snyder's book Bloodlands makes this very clear. It is the sheer horror of the atrocity, but also the large number of civilians, women and children particularly, who were also killed without really any compunction.
Absolutely. During the invasion, there were a number of attacks on smaller villages, for example, during which hundreds and hundreds of inhabitants were massacred, women, children, the elderly. Another big problem was the Luftwaffe and its actions. A lot of strafing of columns of civilians that were clogging the roads of the Polish countryside, and there seems to have been a certain military component to it as well, as they thought that attacks on civilians would cause so much panic and create even larger streams of refugees that were trying to get away from the front line, and by it completely clogging Poland's infrastructure and making it impossible for the Polish army to operate as quickly as it wanted to. So there seems to have been some component of military thinking in these massacres, but many have also witnessed that for many of the pilots this was simply some form of practice and joy shooting. So there were a number of massacres that took place on the Jewish population in connection with Operation Barbarossa. In some of these places, especially around the Białystok area, there were these pogroms in which hundreds of Jews were killed. To this day, it's a very controversial topic. Tensions are high. It's an inflammatory topic, which the Israeli state has lately been quite open about. That they consider that Poland had a very large role in those, or the Polish nation. They have different statements that they make. The Poles, they point to the fact that the Germans had orchestrated a lot of these pogroms, that the Gestapo and SS, they were going around from village to village, and that they were organizing this, sometimes using Polish local collaborators, but that it was still German organized. And the Germans, on the other hand, are sometimes they take full responsibility for it, but then it feels like in official, you could say that the politicians usually have no problems taking full responsibility for these events, as they have been doing it for decades now. But then when you look at the cultural sphere in the movies that they record and spread, then usually there is some kind of good German and that is trying to stop some evil Pole from massacring the local population. So this is another bone of contention that still exists in Polish-German relations.
Unfortunate, and one of the byproducts, of course, is because the Germans set up a lot of these camps on what is now Polish territory.
Yes.
Then there is this sort of confusion in some people's minds, either accidentally or deliberate or willful, that somehow these were Polish concentration camps.
Yes.
And they were German concentration camps on territory which is now Poland. I mean,
this is, as we mentioned, a topic that still is full of emotions. And the Poles, they point to the fact that in the 1950s, the West German state, once the Cold War had started, many of these wartime Nazis had been rehabilitated and allowed to resume high functions in the German administration. And it was the same within the intelligence agencies. And there was this man, Mr. Gehlen, who came up with a strategy to try to shift as much blame from the German state onto local collaborators in parts of Eastern Europe. So he was responsible for coming up with the idea to speak as much as possible about Polish concentration camps, and at the same time speak as little as possible about the German offenders, but instead use the word Nazi, as it was only...
Yes, and that's a good point, because when I interviewed for this program Julian Kulski, who, as you know, fought in the Warsaw Uprising as a 15-year-old boy, I mean, one of the things he said at the very beginning was, who are these Nazis people talk about? We were quite clear. We were fighting Germans.
Yes.
And he was there doing the fighting, so he would know.
This is this gradual shift of language that has taken place over time. And you can see it as a big success of the Germans in that sense. Even in the last few years, there has been some kind of... even by the authorities themselves, they start to claim that the Germans were the first victims of the Nazis, and that the German nation is in the same way a victim of the Second World War, as we all suffered from these Nazis that all of a sudden don't have a specific ethnicity or belong to a certain nation anymore.
They've sort of arrived from space.
Yes, the famous space Nazis. Yes. So here in Poland, this is maybe something that, for example, for the Americans, it's not an emotional thing that they discuss about. For them, whether they are called Nazis or Germans, they don't really care. But for the Poles, they feel that this is an attempt of evading responsibility. And as time passes, people tend to forget, and all of a sudden, it could be that future generations, once there are no living witnesses of history with us anymore, that all of a sudden it will just be that, there was a group of people in Europe, collaborators, Nazis, people with an evil ideology, but they were not really tied to any specific geography or state. So the Poles are quite emotional about this.
If you join us next time on Poland Daily History, as I hope you will, we will pick up the story. Thank you for watching.